They claim they're just using forest residues, but actually a great deal of what the McNeil facility and lots of biomass facilities burn is whole trees. As you can see by this pile that's stacked right outside of the facility, these are trees.
It turns out that the biggest source of green energy in Vermont is something called biomass, burning trees to create electricity.
This is definitely not the way, and that the first step is actually looking at our lifestyles and how we can reduce our energy consumption. This is all the ash that has varying levels of toxic metals, a great deal of radiation, as these trees have been absorbed. Oops, there's a...
You're in unforbidden territory here.
Are we?
I ask both of you to come up to our office, okay?
Is that something you're interested in doing?
It's not an interest. You got 5 seconds or I'm calling 911.
Okay.
You got 2 individuals here. Police will be down here in about 2 minutes.
But you asked us to leave and we're doing so,
I'm
we're not trespassing.
You to leave. I'm asking you to come up to the office.
Okay, thanks for the offer. Maybe next time? You got everything here. So you have the #1 polluter in the state that people think emits magical fairy dust from the smokestack. The reality is what you have is a facility that burns 400,000 green tons a year of trees. Now, this facility burns 30 cords of wood per hour.
That's a hell of a lot of wood.
And on top of that, it actually burns natural gas as well.
And to think you would have to have 10 of these to replace one average coal-fired power plant. You know, it's just not going to work.
It's just nuts. It takes a great deal of fossil fuels to cut down all of these trees, to truck them in, to use the big machinery to dump the wood chips everywhere. So the idea that somehow this is not anything to do with fossil fuels just doesn't even make any sense. It couldn't happen without fossil fuels, in fact.
How did the environmental groups get pulled into this?
Obviously, the main factor is delusion. A lot of these environmental groups have been saying that all we have to do is, for instance, switch our fossil fuel economy over to a few solar panels and windmills, and we can continue living life, as normal. Some of the environmental groups have been for years touting facilities like this, saying that, #1, it's carbon neutral, that this will actually help us fend off climate change because there are no CO2 emissions. It actually emits over 400,000 tons per year of carbon dioxide. Oh, but once we cut them, they'll grow back. They'll grow back over a period of decades to centuries. But we cut every tree in the United States, it would be able to power the country for a year, and then what happens when, the trees are gone?
I discovered biomass plants were not even always biomass plants.
This is actually a solid waste incinerator that's posing as a biomass plant. The impact on this community is severe. The plant is right next to a Head Start school for preschool kids. There is Green Hill Manor, and that's an assisted living senior residence. And there's also a Catholic elementary school right next door.
How do you know they're polluting? Can you see it
We
ever?
can see it. The snow at the elementary school and at the preschool is covered with black, some kind of black soot. We just had it analyzed and it came back as mostly tire chips. They have to add tire-derived fuel to raise the temperature of the fire, because anybody who's tried to burn green wood or wet wood knows that it doesn't burn very well.
But this biomass plant had yet another surprise.
They admit that they burn 20.1 tons per hour of creosote-treated railroad ties. Besides that, they are allowed to burn 500 pounds per hour of PCP-treated railroad ties. These are shipped in from Canada. It's not green, it's not renewable, it's not carbon neutral, it's not anything that they claim to be. Yet, they got $11.5 million grant because it was classified as renewable. The plant owner told us that they were having trouble getting enough wood chips. And he even asked us if we had any scrap wood where we lived, would we call the plant and let them know so they could come up and pick it up.
We're not talking about some old industrial site. We're next to one of the most beautiful places in the world.
We are next to Lake Superior. This is Keweenaw Bay. This is actually Lance Bay. It's part of Keweenaw Bay. It's Lake Superior, our lake. So it's a very sacred place to many people.
No, there's supposed to be a climate change rally. Michigan State University students, inspired by 350.org, were holding a rally for the clean energy future they'd been promised.
Imagine when I found out that it is the largest on-campus coal plant in the nation. The goal is to get the whole world moving beyond fossil fuels.
He wants to do a 350 sign on the steps of the...
But it turned out Michigan State had a form of green energy in mind the students did not support.
The university contracted with a energy contracting company. They put together like a modeling tool. First 2 or 3 months that the steering committee was using this modeling tool, it didn't even contain data for wind or solar. So there was...
Adam told me they were planning on substituting coal burning with biomass burning.
The permit that is currently being considered by the state is a permit for 24,000 tons of biomass per year. And the plan is to do that in all four boilers. Unfortunately, the steering committee considers biomass renewable at the moment, which we're not happy with.
Michigan State wasn't the only university to go green.
I'm happy to announce that Carolina will be going beyond coal in the next decade. Now, as we begin to wean ourselves on coal, we're about to try another alternative energy source, biomass.
And who is here to help the University of North Carolina switch from burning coal to burning trees?
So it is a great pleasure to be here today to celebrate the remarkable step that the university is taking, to say we're going to do our part.
A remarkable step indeed. We're to do our part by getting out of bed with coal companies and into bed with logging companies? Where did the idea of colleges going green by burning trees come from anyway? A little college called Middlebury in the heart of Vermont.
Welcome to the celebration of the opening of Middlebury's new biomass gasification system. It's now my great pleasure to introduce this afternoon's speaker, Bill McKibben.
What powers a learning community? And as of this afternoon, the easy answer to that is wood chips. It's incredibly beautiful to stand over there and see that big bunker full of wood chips. You can put any kind of wood in, oak, willow, whatever you want. Pretty much anything that burns, we can toss in there if we can chip it down to the right size. And there are very few similar cases any place in this country of that kind of change over that scale. But it shows it could happen anywhere, and it should happen anywhere. In fact, it must happen everywhere.
It must happen everywhere. And now it's time for a nature break, enjoying our sustainably managed Michigan forests.
If you walk through here and you look, there's virtually nothing growing. A little bit of grass occasionally.
And it seemed that biomass plants indeed were suddenly everywhere. Like this one in Cadillac, Michigan. In Detroit, an incinerator that burned garbage was considered green.
The Detroit incinerator is known to emit horrible smells and pollutants that neighbors say make them feel sick and put their health at risk.
It's a stink. It's a horrendous stink.
A proposed biofuel plant for the Upper Peninsula of Michigan would consume trees from tens of thousands of square miles.
In order to create 40 million gallons of ethanol, they were going to have to use up over 1 million tons of green wood. We pointed out that they were going to be using more natural gas than they were going to be creating ethanol to displace the natural gas. If you continue to do this, you're going to be fertilizing the forest.
Fertilizing the forest with fossil fuels.
Fossil fuel-based, right, fertilizer.
Made from natural gas.
Yeah.
Then came a ballot proposal backed by Bill McKibben and nearly every major environmental group, requiring Michigan to get 25% of its electricity from renewable sources by the year 2025.
This year, Michigan voters have a choice: keep burning dirty coal and oil, or move Michigan to clean, renewable energy like wind and solar. Vote yes on Proposal 3.
Surprisingly, Proposal 3, also known as 25 by 25, was the brainchild of an organization that was 100% biofuels and biomass.
Allowing America's farms, ranches, and forest lands to be active participants in contributing to America's energy future.
These are the biomass and biofuel plants across the U.S. How did this happen? And it wasn't just the USA, it was all around the world. Wood chips, which is just a euphemism for trees, are being exported to Europe from America, British Columbia, Brazil, and Indonesia, wherever they can get them from. Biomass, especially when you add in biofuels, is by far the largest portion of green energy around the world, even in Germany, source of the solar miracle. But maybe I was missing something. Maybe I had it all wrong. I decided to ask people protesting fossil fuels how they felt about biomass and biofuels as green energy.
Would you say we don't need to do biofuels, food, and forest for energy?
No, definitely not. Of course not. Of course not.
Burning biomass, any kind of combustion, is something we just need to move away from.
The more trees we have, the better.
A lot of that didn't grow overnight. If we cut it down, we don't know the impact of that.
You're here as an oak tree, fight a chainsaw. That wouldn't be saving the planet.
No, it's a painful way to go. I can tell you that right now.
It'll take you a while to regrow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It wouldn't be me. It would be like an offspring, you know?
With so many people doing it on such a massive scale, all of a sudden at once, like, that's pretty serious.
No, I think we should not be burning trees.
No. Why would we cut down trees? We shouldn't replace one terrible way of getting energy with another terrible way of getting energy. Because it's one thing.
Clearly, most citizens are opposed to biomass and biofuels. But what about environmental leaders? At times, they have promoted biomass, but other times, they sound like they are against biomass. Like this Sierra Club policy, we are deeply concerned about the implications of wood to energy for native forests. Or this statement signed on by 75 environmental groups: burning forests for energy will destroy one of our best defenses against climate change. But then again, their language leaves loopholes that enable biomass. The NRDC says you must use the right types of biomass. The Dogwood Alliance says maybe small biomass plants are okay. And the Sierra Club flat out states biomass can be sustainable. Which side are they really on? I thought for sure with the camera rolling, environmental leaders would speak for the trees.
We're here to tell a story about what the forests of this state, of our Commonwealth, mean to us.
Does your organization have any stance on that?
I'm not sure I would say we support it as much as we can wrap our heads around it. We've almost made a peace with the timber industry.
I'm just curious, what's your group's stance on using forests for biomass?
Biomass is renewable, biomass is sustainable.
And I'm with Clean Water Action. We don't really have a stand on it. If the director of the Sierra Club was here, she'd be able to talk your ear off about it.
I'm the director for the Sierra Club in Pennsylvania.
Does the Sierra Club support or not support biomass?
I'm not totally prepared to talk about our policy on biomass today. Our position is somewhat nuanced, so I just want to be, careful not to.
So you're with 350?
I am.
Does 350 have a position on biomass? Because I'm kind of actually...
I can't really speak for 350.
Do you personally have an opinion about whether we should be burning trees for green energy?
No, I don't have an opinion on that. I like a fire.
One of my biggest concerns as an environmentalist is that we're starting to burn trees. That there are tree burning power plants. Are you aware of the problems with biomass or biofuels?
Yeah, I'm not as aware of that as I could be or I should be.
Jeff Gibbs, working on a documentary in Michigan, where I live, where I'm from. There's large plants that burn trees for energy, and pretty much whole trees chipped up. Do you have a thought about whether that should be part of green energy or not?
Well, the great thing about green energy is you don't have to pick a favorite.
Jeff Gibbs.
Oh, hello.
My biggest concern is that in Germany, for instance, they're moving towards solar and wind, but 60% of their actual energy is coming from biomass. 60% of what's considered renewable energy. Burning trees for energy?
I don't know the details out of Germany. What Germany's really doing is a lot of sun and wind, and that's really powerful to see.
I'd like to see us come out against any burning of trees for clean energy. Would you?
Although I confess I stoke my wood stove almost every night of the winter, so I'm not the right.
But designating green energy for power plants.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not what today's about. We're on the.
But if we're burning trees instead of fossil fuels.
This is from Taiwan.
Oh, good.
And we're wondering that what role do you want to play in this market?
I think the biomass question is a non-starter. I found only one environmental leader willing to reject biomass and biofuels.
So we are talking of the old oil economy trying to maintain itself now through another raw material, the green planet. The only reason corn and soya is being planted for biofuel in this country is the subsidies make it profitable. I think the big crisis of our times is our minds have been manipulated to give power to illusions. We shifted to measuring growth, not in terms of how life is enriched, but in terms of how life is destroyed.
Her honesty was refreshing. But as for the rest of them, I wondered, what are they hiding? And why are they hiding it? Is it their ignorance? Or is it something else? What if they themselves had become misguided? What if they've made some kind of deal they shouldn't have made and are leading us all off the cliff? It was long past time for me to come to grips with the other elephant in the living room, the profit motive. The only reason we've been force-fed the story climate change plus renewables equals worse saved is because billionaires, bankers, and corporations profit from it. And the reason we're not talking about overpopulation, consumption, and the suicide of economic growth is that would be bad for business, especially the cancerous form of capitalism that rules the world, now hiding under a cover of green.
Today, Bloomberg Philanthropies is making, I'm happy to announce, a new investment of $30 million in the Beyond Coal campaign. We have more. I'm glad to say that more than a dozen additional funders have committed to match that $30 million.
And who were these new partners? One of them was Jeremy Grantham, billionaire, world's leading timber investment advisor. They were not investing in trees to turn them into nature preserves, which might answer another riddle. Why is this name redacted on the Sierra Club's tax return? Would they be embarrassed to take $3 million from a man who made his living selling the forests of the world? Bloomberg bringing a timber investment billionaire to the party was no coincidence. Bloomberg sponsored a UN climate session to discuss ramping up biomass and biofuels around the world. Billionaires were in love with the idea of turning what was left of nature into green profits. Remember when Al Gore had gotten Richard Branson to invest billions into saving the planet?
Richard Branson, founder of Virgin Atlantic, powered a Boeing 747 from London to Amsterdam on a coconut oil mixture to highlight the potential of this amazing oil as a clean energy biofuel.
Branson had actually invested in biofuels. He was attempting to replace the jet fuel damaging the planet with biofuels that required the consumption of the living planet. And it was game on for the airline industry.
Dozens of researchers from all over the Northwest gathered in Missoula the past 2 days to explore the idea of converting the region's massive reserves of wood into jet fuel, especially with the demand for aircraft fuel expected to grow by 1 billion gallons in the Northwest alone.
United Airlines will buy a $30 million stake in biofuel company Fulcrum Bioenergy. The airline used 3.9 billion gallons of fuel last year.
What technology was Silicon Valley billionaire Vinod Khosla hoping to profit from?
Nature takes 1 million years to produce our crude oil. Kior can produce it in seconds.
The company took over this old paper mill where logs are picked up by a giant claw, dropped into a shredder, and pulverized into wood chips.
Clean
gasoline.
green gasoline.
There must be a downside.
There is no downside.
The bank that crashed the economy, ruined millions of lives, and has their tentacles on the levers of power. What would their favorite form of green energy be?
One of the very interesting markets that we deal with is Brazil. It's unlike any other market in that today, alternative energy isn't really alternative energy. It's so much a part of the fabric of the society. The country began to utilize its vast resources of sugarcane to produce ethanol.
There was a man from Goldman Sachs who was particularly in love with turning forests into profits.
Has everybody got enough coffee? You might want to get some more.
Meet David Blood, former CEO of asset management for Goldman Sachs. How much money did Mr. Blood believe should be invested in green energy?
A natural alignment for something in the order of $40 to $50 trillion worth of capital.
$40 to $50 trillion. And who was going to help the man from Goldman Sachs? Help him raise that astronomical amount of money?
A gentleman some of you may recognize and know, Bill McKibben. It's entirely dependent on what kind of political will we can muster, and if we do not get this done very fast, then we're not going to get it done.
And so Bill McKibben went forth to generate the political will for trillions of dollars in green investments.
Our next guest has been called our nation's leading environmentalist.
And you are, in some sense, the grand poobah of the environmental movement.
My guest tonight is on a global crusade.
On a global crusade for what?
Commit to divesting from fossil fuels. We can't justify investing our money in companies that are basically running Genesis backward.
So when you divest from fossil fuels and invest in green funds, what are you investing in? I took a deep dive into Securities and Exchange Commission filings to find out. For instance, in the Green Century funds, recommended by 350.org and Bill McKibben, I found less than 1% solar and wind, and 99% things like mining, oil and gas infrastructure companies, including a tar sands exploiter, McDonald's, one of the companies driving meat consumption across the planet, Archer Daniels Midland, one of the world's largest producers of biofuel, Coca-Cola, the largest creator of plastic pollution on Earth, logging and paper companies, including one that brags about biomass burning, and banks. Lots of banks, including BlackRock, the largest financer of deforestation on Earth.
The business that they're engaged in is actually destroying our life support system.
The Sierra Club also partners with a green fund called Aspiration. Aspiration also includes dozens of companies profiting from the destruction of the planet, including Chevron, ExxonMobil, Chesapeake Energy.
In order to maximize the production potential of the well, the shale formation will be hydraulically fractured.
The Russian gas giant Gazprom.
Gazprom owns the world's largest explored gas reserves, 36 trillion cubic meters.
And in perhaps the most bizarre twist of all, the Sierra Club's Green Fund's biggest holding is in Viva, the world's largest consumer of forests, to be incinerated in green energy biomass plants. Of course, one investment option is a green fund run by Bill McKibben's buddy, David Blood. And who was the chairman of this fund? Someone familiar.
Use capitalism that gives incentives for people to do their best.
Al Gore and David Blood partnered to form a company called Blood and Gore. No, scratch that. Generation Investment Management. And within this fund, Blood and Gore designated a special investment category, targeting $650 million of biomass and biofuels. Funny thing was, they partnered before Al Gore's film came out. Was that movie just about climate change? Or something else?
On one side, we have gold bars. Don't they look good? I'd just like to have some of those gold bars. On the other side of the scales, the entire planet. If we do the right thing, then we're going to create a lot of wealth.
And when it came time for Al Gore to choose between the entire planet and getting him some of them gold bars, what choice did he make? Here is Al Gore earning his keep by pretending to care about the rainforest while lobbying Congress on behalf of the sugarcane ethanol industry.
Any comment on the Brazilian effort here with the issue of the possibility of expanding into that Amazon River basin with further deforestation to produce more ethanol out of sugarcane is a worry, and apparently you're not as concerned about that.
No, I am. I simply forgot. What's been going on there is really very troubling. And with your permission, I'll show you a very quick example of it over a period of 25 years.
The invasion of sugarcane monocultures in the region clashes with the indigenous people's right to land. These are images of a last-ditch attempt by the Guarani Kiowa to resist eviction.
Important to note that the exploitation of the sugarcane growing areas in Brazil does not have to inevitably have the knock-on consequence of causing destruction in the Amazon.
Sugarcane fields are burning. They're set alight before the harvest to eliminate the leaves and tops of the plant, which makes cutting more efficient. Environmentalists blame the seemingly endless sugarcane fields for air and water pollution on an epic scale. And along with deforestation, the threat it poses to the environment is becoming clear. Once the indigenous families were expelled, the landowners set their homes on fire.
Is there anything too terrible to qualify as green energy?
Thank you very much, Secretary Mavis and the US Navy for once again inviting me to speak with you today. The Navy's work to help launch this new fuels industry is invaluable.
The U.S. Navy has a special message this year. It is time to turn green. Joining the vessels is what the U.S. Navy calls its Great Green Fleet of warships powered by fuel from renewable sources like algae, grass, and animal fat.
Animal fat.
The next time you fill up at your neighborhood gas station, you might find yourself pumping a little alligator into your tank. That's right, UL Lafayette researchers have developed alligator fat into a renewable source for biofuels.
And once we run through the animals, what's next? GE, who brings you nuclear energy and wind turbines, is ready with a plan.
I believe that liquid fuels, chemicals are eventually going to have to be made from sustainable raw materials. We believe that seaweed is one of the most attractive opportunities.
Better hurry. 1 year after it was filmed, the seaweed forest was dead. You might ask yourself, how could men destroy what remains of nature to enrich themselves? Well, that's why they're billionaires, and you're not. The takeover of the environmental movement by capitalism is now complete. Environmentalists are no longer resisting those with the profit motive, but collaborating with them. The Nature Conservancy is now the Logging Conservancy.
We will capture the most important pieces biologically, and there will be another large block sold to timber investment groups.
The Union of Concerned Scientists has become the Union of Concerned Salesmen, having taken millions not for science, but to create markets for electric cars. The Sierra Club sells electric cars and solar panels right from their website.
The best thing about Sungevity is that they make it easy for you. All that you have to do is to say yes.
The New York Times partners with ExxonMobil to bring you the good news about biofuels.
Algae-derived fuel could help us meet growing demand.
Treehugger.com, which claims to be the largest single source of environmental news, was founded and funded by Georgia Pacific, a logging company. In fact, they are neighbors. Georgia Pacific is owned by our friends the Koch brothers, who are likely the largest recipient of green energy biomass subsidies in the United States. Yes, the merger of environmentalism and capitalism is now complete, but maybe it's always been complete.
How is 350.org funded?
Well, not very well.
Who are your funders?
Sure. To the degree that we have any money at all, it's come from a few foundations in Europe
which ones?
and U.S. Let's see. I'm trying to think who the biggest funders are. There's a foundation based in Sweden called, I think it's called the Rasmussen Foundation, that I think has been the biggest funder.
So you don't get money from Pew or Rockefeller or any of those big
No, we did. Rockefeller Brothers Fund gave us some money right when we were starting out. That's been useful too.
But they no longer fund you?
I don't know. I don't have a sort of
really
funder sitting in front of me.
And it's usually something that people know.
Rockefeller's been one of our is a great ally in this fight.
You just sold your TV network to Al Jazeera.
Right.
And that government is basically nothing but an oil producer.
Gas mainly and oil.
Your take on that, about $100 million pre-tax from a country that bases its wealth on fossil fuels. Isn't there a bit of hypocrisy in that?
Well, I get the criticism. I just disagree with it. I'm proud of the transaction.
You couldn't find for your business a more sustainable choice.
What is not sustainable about it?
Because it is backed by fossil fuel money.
I get it. I get it.
And so, if you got yourself an environmental movement and environmental leaders, why not buy the holy day itself?
Happy Earth Day!
Now we are facing the greatest sets of issues that we've seen in my lifetime. It's time now for a new generation to jump up on the stage and create a habitable country, a habitable planet that we can all enjoy. Are you that generation? I need to thank Building Energy, which provided so much solar power to this that we've powered the entire event with solar energy.
But when I went backstage to see what was really going on,
You ain't running this whole thing on that, Jack. I can tell you that. The toaster is 1,200 watts. So that run right there could run a toaster.
I found the installer.
Hi.
Are they running the festival on these solar panels?
The concert is run by diesel generation system. They didn't ask us to energize the concert.
Oh, okay.
And we'd also like to thank our incredible corporate sponsors who've been behind the movement to end extreme poverty and tackle climate change since the very beginning. We want to thank Toyota, Citibank. We want to thank Caterpillar.
We're standing at the construction site of the Dakota Access Pipeline. It looks like there are at least 3 bulldozers actually bulldozing the land. People have gone through the fence. The bulldozers are still going. And they're marching over the dirt mounds.
Without these partners, it wouldn't be possible. Let's give them a round of applause, everyone.
Now, I know this all might seem overwhelming. It's the kind of thing that we normally don't try and think about. But by not thinking about it, it stands a good chance of doing us in. I truly believe that the path to change comes from awareness. That awareness alone can begin to create the transformation. There is a way out of this. We humans must accept that infinite growth on a finite planet is suicide. We must accept that our human presence is already far beyond sustainability and all that that implies. We must take control of our environmental movement and our future from billionaires and their permanent war on planet Earth. They are not our friends. Less must be the new more. And instead of climate change, we must at long last accept that it's not the carbon dioxide molecule destroying the planet. It's us. It's not one thing, but everything we humans are doing. A human-caused apocalypse. If we get ourselves under control, all things are possible. And if we don't,
Yeah.